Who put that? Stephanie?
Well, it's Robin Harris. Are you talking about, which one are you referring to?
I'm sorry, the one that says Peter Brown invited me and I was excited about the title. Stephanie, was that you? Okay, go ahead. Tell me, what was it about the title? You can't unmute?
Sorry, I can't. I've never used the annotate functionality. It's very cool, but I couldn't get out of it. So
very cool.
As an early childhood teacher, I know we often spend a lot of time thematically, and obviously Black History Month and Martin Luther King are some of those really important themes. And oftentimes we spend a lot of time talking about that from a deficit perspective. And I would really love to gear my teachers towards talking about the work that Martin Luther King did, as well as a number of incredible human beings who, from that strengths-based lens and the amount of incredible work that they did to get us, and then and connect that to the work that needs to be done.
That's awesome. Thank you, Stephanie. If you see that your text is overlapping somebody else's, you can actually click on that box and drag it and move it around. So if you want to move yours around, part of the reason why we're using this is because I wanted to teach you how to use it. So no time like the present to learn some other online tools about how to do this. So I'll give you a chance to kind of figure that out. If somebody wrote a statement that you're like, oh, that really resonates with me, go back to that annotate function. And this time I want you to pick stamp. And you can choose like a heart stamp or a check mark stamp. And I want you to heart or check mark what somebody else said that you're like, yeah, that really resonates with me. That's a reason why I'm here too. So I'll do one. You can see I kind of liked that one. There you go. Geared towards elementary ed. Yeah. There's not enough of those, are there? That's awesome. First grade teacher in a rural white children interested in ways to bring it into the classroom, not just around Martin Luther King Jr. My classroom experience too, is 100% in rural community in Missouri, where we had 99% white students in our building. So I can completely resonate with that. Current district that I'm in, that is not the case, but that one was. I love these comments about David. He's going to love seeing that. Awesome. Well, I hope that you just learned a little bit about how to annotate, and we're going to use this feature throughout the entire time. So I hope that it helps you to stay engaged as you're learning. Okay, so I'm sure you're familiar with Kahoot. We're going to start out the lesson today with a little bit of a quiz time about Black history in Oklahoma. Are you ready? So if you're going to have it up on your computer, awesome. If you're going to have it up on your phone, that's great. Oh, now do you see what's happening? I got to teach you this too. See how your comments are all showing up on my screen, even though I'm not on my slide anymore? So you can go back to that annotate function and you can hit the erase button and it'll erase it. So go ahead and practice that. Looky there. You can erase your stamp. As the teacher, I also have the authority to erase, but I just want you to see that other people that students can erase their own stuff here as well. Marianne Brown, if you could delete your comment. Folks that talk about early childhood. I'll let you see it again here just for a second. So you can kind of see a couple of the ones that are still, I need to learn things. Awesome, there we go, great. Okay, so don't look at my computer screen right now because that desktop is a hot mess. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and play this quiz about Black history. We're going to play classic. So it's sometimes easy if you have a computer next to you or a phone next to you that you could do this. So the directions are on the screen. You can go to www.kahoot.it and enter that PIN. Or if you have the Kahoot app, you can enter the PIN there. Once you enter your PIN, it's going to ask you for your name. Great. Names are loading. I think I need to delete one of my annotations as well. We'll give everybody just a couple more seconds and then we're going to move on. About 5 more seconds. Okay, here we go. This is called Who is This Famous Black Oklahoman? Here we go. So this one is the nation's first, or organized the nation's first publicized sit-in at Katz Drugstore in 1958 in an effort to deseg Oklahoma. Who was it? So you can see the answer choices on my screen. You choose the corresponding shape and color. And once everybody's answered, the timer goes away. All 4 of these people that are listed as options are all famous Oklahomans who are Black. And so most of you are correct. It was Clara Looper. Okay, here we go. See our little scoreboard here. Steph, you're ahead, but just barely. Here we go with question 2. Who founded the American Beauty Products for Black people in the 1980s and became the largest Black-owned business in Tulsa and became the America's Top 100 business? Donnie Chapman, Leona Mitchell, Ellis Woods, or Maxine Johnson? How many of you are totally like blind guessing right now? Because you're like, I have no idea whatsoever. It's got 3 seconds if you haven't entered in your answer yet. Okay, ooh, it was a tie. The correct answer was A, Donnie Chapman. So she co-founded the business with her husband. So great job. For those of you that are just joining us, the Kahoot game pin is on the lower right-hand side of your screen. It's 950, 76, 60. Love to have you join us here. This is who named the famous Oklahoman, the Black Oklahoman. Here we go. Our leaderboard has changed a little bit with Robin surging to the lead. Question number 3, who became a leader in educational, civic, and church affairs during his years in Tulsa and became principal of what became known as Booker T. Washington High School? For those of you just joining us, the game pin's on the lower right-hand side of the screen. You can go to kahoot.it, enter the game pin, and join us at any time. We're taking a quiz on famous Black Oklahomans. There we go. It's kind of toss-up, wasn't it? Ellis Walker Woods. Don't feel bad about not knowing these things. I hope that you're learning some things, and that's really what this can be about, right? Okay, let's take a look at our leaderboard here. Robin, you're still in the lead. Here we go. Question 4, name the famous Black Oklahoman who is the state's first and only Black congressman so far who has served in the U.S. House. And he did so from 1995 to 2003.
Sorry, I'm an Oklahoma City girl through and through.
So you know this one.
The Tulsa questions are going to throw me off. I need to get better.
We kind of have the same situation in Missouri. I'm in Kansas City, not in St. Louis, and I make sure everybody knows. Okay. I think we've got a couple people sitting out on this one, taking our timer all the way down to 0. JC Watts, that is correct. Let's take a look at our leaderboard. Robin's still in the lead, gaining. There's quite a bit of a lead there. Okay, who's the famous Black Oklahoman who became the first Black man to be named to the state Supreme Court and became the first Black Chief Justice of that court in 2013? Pretty cool that some of this history is so recent. Pretty sad that some of this history is so recent. It is Tom Colbert. Okay, good job. For those of you just joining us, we have kahoot.it on the bottom right-hand side of the screen with the game pin so you can participate. Okay, here we go. Next, see the leaderboard. Robin's dominating, but the leadership has changed a little bit. Named the famous Black Oklahoman who, despite losing everything in the Tulsa race riots, he set up a law office in a tent to help victims. Found this story fascinating. Take a look at that law office, folks. All right. BC Franklin. All right, our leaderboard still has Robin on top, the famous Black Oklahoman, who was the first Black woman to serve in the Oklahoma State Senate. She served from 1987 to 2005. Who was she? Answers are coming in a little faster for this one, so maybe you're familiar with this woman. Maxine Horner. You guys dominated that question. Okay, next. Robin. Ooh, she increased her lead up to like almost 1,600. Here we go. The famous Black Oklahoman who is now Oklahoma's first non-binary Black and first Muslim state legislator as of 2021. You guys know this story? Pretty big deal for my Oklahoma City friends, right?
Yes, we know this story.
Here we go. It is Miss Turner. Okay. Should say Mix Turner. Okay, Robin is still in the lead. Who graduated from OSU and became an educator, public speaker, writer, journalist, thinker, and blogger? Co-founded the Black Wall Street Times. Is a member of the LGBTQ community as well. It is Nehemiah Frank. And last, but certainly not least, the famous Black Oklahoman who became the nation's first Black female mayor in 1973 in Taft, Oklahoma. The nation's first Black female mayor, and you guys got her. That's pretty amazing. It is Miss Faye Davis. All right, so let's take a look at our leaderboard. The final count in third place is Steph. Nice job, Steph. Second place, A. Hamilton. And in first place, held the lead most of the time, I believe, is Robin. All right. Great job, everybody. Great job. So what did you learn from this Kahoot? Feel free to either type it in the chat or just unmute yourself for just a second and share. Our group is pretty small. What did you learn from that Kahoot?
I learned about Nehemiah. I did not know that he was a part of the community, and that's pretty great.
Yeah, that's awesome.
You know, and the other one about the I didn't know that we had the first African American female mayor. I did not know, and I just did process of elimination based off that one. I'm just curious to know, since you're not from Oklahoma, where did you get your research from?
Yeah, so we'll talk a little bit about that later, but I just spent a few days Googling famous Black Oklahomans. And I pulled a lot from newspapers in Tulsa. The Oklahoman was really rich with information. And then I will also share some other historical sites in Oklahoma, including the archives there, and Oklahoma State University's has a repository also. So I looked through a bunch of different ones in order to be able to find these. I love that folks are saying I have a lot to learn about Black history. You know, I'll be honest, folks, as I was preparing for this session, I thought I really need to spend the time doing this in Kansas. I'm not from Kansas, but I work in Kansas and I live in Missouri. And I know a lot more about Black history in Missouri because it was a class that I taught when I taught high school. But I don't know very much about Black history in Kansas. So I definitely need to learn a lot as well. So what we do see is that Oklahoma has a really rich Black history, right? And every answer, for those of you that missed it, every answer to each of those questions was an Oklahoman who has made significant contributions to Oklahoma, both in the past and in the present. And I'm happy to share that quiz with you if you'd like. I can maybe send it through the Oklahoma Council for the Social Studies and make sure that you have a copy if you want to be able to go back and see who was featured there. But maybe you're one of those people who are like, yeah, I have a lot to learn. I know for me, I'm like, I have a lot to learn. Some of you said in the chat that, yeah, I didn't know any of that. So let's spend just a moment about why we should teach Black history. There's really countless reasons why we should do that. So here is a few. One, it validates the identities of our students. Students are always looking for representation in our classroom, and this is a great way to do that. But in the meantime, it also provides us an opportunity to challenge prejudices and misconceptions that our students might hold. So if you know that there is a certain perception or prejudice among your students about their Black colleagues, then this is a great time to challenge those stereotypes. So I've got littles living in my house with me. They're in first grade and second grade. And we talk all the time about how a lot of times Black people are only taught about within the context of the civil rights movement, which almost puts them in a position of constantly violently responding to things that are happening to them. And there's not a focus enough on the perpetrator of the oppression, but it's so much about Black response. And so it can cause white students to think that maybe all Black people are violent when we know that's not true. But also, maybe somebody had said earlier that a lot of times people perceive Black people from a deficit model, right? That's an ongoing problem in education, is that there's white saviors that might be coming around thinking they need to help Black students or save Black students and thinking that they're maybe not as capable. We lower our expectations for our Black students. So what can we do to constantly amplify those voices and try to do whatever we can to eliminate those prejudices and eliminate those misconceptions as well? A lot of times we'll hear questions or statements about how Black history is American history, and there's a lot of reasons why that is a good way of thinking. Dr. LeGarrette King is an associate professor at the University of Missouri in Columbia. He is the director of the Carter Center for Teaching Black History at the University of Missouri in Columbia. And he recently wrote an article that was just published in Social Education, which is an NCSS journal for secondary students, about how only seeing Black history as American history can actually be a little bit problematic, because a lot of times what happens is he calls it teaching white history in blackface. It's when if it's more of white culture to celebrate the 4th of July, much like Frederick Douglass says, what is the 4th of July to the Black person or to the enslaved person? And what kinds of histories and holidays and Juneteenth, those are all things that will matter to a different cultural group. So be careful to not think about Black history as simply fitting within the white lens and the white dominant narrative, and instead being really open to the fact that Black history is American history for sure. He posits that it's also a lot of times a separate history with different dates of significance, with different people that are continually marginalized and minoritized. Okay, so I'll share you that reference later. Also, everyone benefits. The more that we teach about the richness and the diversity that makes up this country, the more that we're on the path and trajectory towards equality, equity, and justice. So I knew I was speaking to elementary teachers today, and I have the privilege of working with elementary teachers in my own school district. And so I just want to talk really quickly before we dive into social studies. When am I supposed to teach Black history? You know, we know that traditionally it's reserved for February. That was not necessarily intended to stay February, but to highlight the idea that Black people have been excluded and erased from history and from the critical story that makes America so beautiful. And so in ELA, what are things that you can do? Have picture books that represent Black people, that are really importantly written by Black authors. I'm going to share with you a recent report that came out in New York City, which you would consider to be an incredibly diverse city. And this study came out and said for the average student in grades pre-K through 8 in New York City, the likelihood that they encounter white authors is 8 out of every 10 books they encounter in their schooling experience. 8 out of every 10. So what can we do to better seek out Black authors? They are there. We can't throw our hands up and say, can't find them. Yeah, we can, and we need to do better. Also, Dr. Bishop, who is very often not given credit for having coined this term of using books as windows and mirrors, which quote her because Black women often are uncited for their scholarship, and Dr. Bishop deserves to be cited for this work. To find, when I was working in a really rural part of Missouri, a lot of times when I encounter other teachers from rural areas, they'll say things like, well, all of my kids are white, so why do I need to teach Black history? Well, if we really believe in helping kids to be prepared for the world is not dominated by white people. They are not the majority of the world. And so it's incumbent upon us to teach about experiences that look like kids in our classroom, but also teach about ones that maybe do not, especially if you're in those more homogenous areas. And again, going back to challenging those misconceptions. Okay. Also, one of the things that Dr. King says in that article is instead of always positioning Black history within slavery and within the civil rights movement, how can we highlight Black joy and celebrations and achievements and agency in ways that a lot of times our traditional curriculum does not do that? So we're gonna seek out some ways to do that today. And then we also want to be aware of dangerous depictions that could actually show up in ELA. There was a great piece written, and I'll give you the citation for all of these later, just a year ago, that talks about the dangerous misconceptions and depictions of Black people in children's literature, especially their depictions of slavery. And they give some instances about what they call the happy little slave and how dangerous that is, that we show books that have kids seeing themselves as, why is this something I should have been happy about? This wasn't happy. And we can't be consistently nodding our heads and saying, oh yeah, that's just how it was. There were happy slaves. No. And so they provide a really wonderful framework for how to think about what books we use and how to be more critical in our approaches to choosing the ones that we choose in our classroom. What about science and math? Do you do a community garden? Our schools do community gardens. Why not pull in some scientists like George Washington Carver, who developed methods to prevent soil depletion? PBS has some really great resources to showcase that, and other scientists. What about your learning how to tell time in first, second, and third grade? Did you know that Benjamin Banneker created the first American clock? And so here's a couple of sources where you can see some more. But really the important thing here is to find ways to include Black history and Black voices all year long, not just when there's a holiday, not just during Black History Month, but that you're really seeking, and not even just social studies, but you're going, where can I incorporate this in math? Where could I incorporate this in science? And always asking yourself those questions. So now let's get to the super duper fun part, which is in social studies. How can we do that? We're gonna have some engaging practices here in just a minute with some primary sources I think that you're really gonna like. But we definitely want to use secondary and primary sources of every kind, because what we really want to do is to fully humanize the past as much as we can without physically being there. And when we only show one aspect or one side of Black history, we're actually hurting kids of every race. So let's look for photographs, let's look for drawings, and let's look for oral histories. Let's look for text. A lot of times when we think of primary sources, we think of only using text. But the fact of the matter is, especially with our youngest of learners, photographs are the most accessible. So what can we do to get kids to learn Black history? Through photographs. We'll talk about that in a moment. Weinberg and Martin in 2009 argued, which a lot of historians would disagree with, is that it might be okay to adapt those resources to make them to increase their access. So let's say you have a really rich journal entry that you want to be able to share with students, but the vocab is pretty tough or the entry is pretty long. How can you excerpt that? How can you pull out some key vocabulary words in order to increase access for more of your kids? A lot of times I find in my work that elementary teachers, especially in the primary grades, kind of throw their hands up to primary sources because they think it's just too hard. And so I'm going to show you some resources that you can use with kids and how you can use it in a way that's not hard. Also, in social studies, you can have guest speakers. Who in your community can you call in? We shouldn't be operating in a vacuum. You've got parents, you've got community leaders that would love to come in. If you're in a largely homogenous area and you want to add in voices that don't look like you, that challenge those prejudices, let's say, for example, you're a second grade teacher and you're talking about your community, right? And you're talking about the civics and laws and obeying rules and laws and why we have them. But a student cannot fathom a Black female judge. You can find one. You can Skype with them, Zoom with them. Skype actually has some programs that will help you to connect to experts who are already out there who are saying, pick me, I want to come in and talk to your kids. And so you can hop on Skype and sign up for a free account to be able to connect with people. I've seen teachers connect with archaeologists in the Middle East in that way. So it's pretty cool. Pulling in all sorts of community resources that you have at your disposal. Do you have a local NAACP? Do you have local Black churches that might have rich oral histories that they can come in and say, let me tell you the story about our town, about our state, that you can add their voices to your classroom. So here's what some of you had already kind of hit up before, which is, how did you find those sources? So first and foremost, Google is a great friend. So I typed in various famous Black Oklahomans in history, present day Black Oklahomans, movers and shakers. And that's kind of was like my launching point. And when I did that, it immediately took me to some of these other things that I'm going to tell you about. One, oklahomacity.org has a whole section just on Black history. Take a look at that. And if there are more sources that you want access to, call up their librarian or their archivist. They would love to help you. I was working with third grade teachers about Olathe history, just the town where we are. We literally picked up the phone and said, here's what we're looking for. We're looking for resources on this. Can you help? And within 2 hours, the archivist had emailed us back saying, nobody ever calls. This is the work we love to do, and sent us PDFs and photographs and just did like this wonderful dump of resources that were exactly on the topic we were looking for. And we didn't have to spend any of the time doing it. So knowing kind of who to call and who to go to. So those libraries, those archives, the Oklahoma State Archive, you probably have some kind of archive in your county and maybe even in your city, depending on how big your city is. What about other people in your community that can serve as oral history and primary sources too, to talk about their experiences? A lot of the first generation folks who experienced the Tulsa race riot, for example, when white supremacists came in and totally said, we don't want to have anything to, we don't want Black brilliance, we don't want Black access, we want to stop everything good that is happening here because it was so economically powerful. And these Black folks came together and they formed a community that was vibrant, and the racists came in and burned it all down, and a bunch of Black people died. But when you talk about that event in just as a silo, when you could go back to primary sources in the traditional form. And while a lot of those first generation victims have passed, they've passed that history on to their children, and those children are out there telling their stories. And I found several of them online. The Library of Congress, the National Archives are also great, and also the National Museum for African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. is a great resource as well. So what I would like for you to do is I'm going to kind of go through a couple of these different ways to use primary sources with you. Some of the different strategies we're going to do today is caption writer, analysis documents, and observe, reflect, question. I'll combine a little bit of the zoom in and out. This QR code is actually going to take you to a website that will explain all of these different strategies to you, because we're only going to be able to try out a couple of them today for how to use primary sources. So we've talked about why we should teach Black history, when we can teach Black history, how do we find the sources? But ultimately the question becomes, what do we do with the sources when we get them? Because a lot of studies have shown that a lot of teachers avoid using primary sources just because they don't know what to do. So we're going to practice some. So that QR code will actually take you to the website that explains all of these. But here's the first activity I want to do with you. So in the chat box below, what I would like for you to do is caption this photograph. So you're going to examine this photograph, and in the chat box, jot down in about 30 to 60 seconds a caption for this photograph. And for those of you that are like me and you're like, I hate to be wrong, that's the whole point, is that we're doing something we're going to ask kids to do. And this is going to be very powerful. Okay, boys playing baseball, kids playing stickball, kids being kids. Yes, there is a purple box over your picture on purpose. This strategy is kind of an iteration of zoom in, zoom out, where you could just have kids focus on one little section of a picture and you can slowly zoom out. And so what I've done here is I've blocked off some critical pieces of the photograph, because what I want you to do and what I want students to do is to understand that as you get more information, it is okay for your opinion to change. Let me say that again, right? As we get more information, our opinion is going to change. So what we're doing by creating a caption, you're in essence making an argument, right? Because you're finding evidence in that picture. So I'm going to call somebody out here. How about, and you're going to have to unmute and be ready to annotate. Okay, are you ready? Everybody get ready, because I'm going to call on somebody random. I should call on Glenn Weeby just because I know him. Okay, so how about Leah? Leah's, go ahead and unmute for me. Leah's caption says, kids playing baseball. Leah, could you please use the annotate feature and circle for me the different evidences that you used to create that caption?
I would love to, and I'm so delighted to be here, but know that I just joined a few minutes ago because I had another meeting that ran. So talk me through how to use the annotation feature. I'd be happy to do that.
Awesome. So toggle, it figures that I call on the one person, right? Toggle over where it says, wherever your Zoom bar is, that blue bar where you mute, and you'll see over on the right-hand side, it'll say annotate in that bar. Do you see that? It looks like a pencil.
I'm not seeing it. I'm so sorry. If you want to move on to somebody else, and I can just maybe do it verbally.
Yes, go ahead and do it verbally.
Okay, so if I had a pencil in my hand, I would circle his shoulders, because it looks like he's throwing. His body posture, it looks like he's throwing. And then I would circle a smile, because kids playing baseball look like they're always having fun. Is that the sort of thing you're looking for? So
you're looking here, right? His shoulder looks like he's throwing. You said he looks like he's smiling, so he might be having fun. What else?
Maybe his feet, because you can see how that also furthers this idea. I thought at one point he had a mitt in his hand, like he was holding a mitt, but I think that's just his pants.
Oh, okay. So it could be a mitt, could be pants. Okay, thank you so much. All right, so you see how this kind of works here, right? So you all have your guesses. Let's take a look at the next one. So I'm revealing a little bit more. How has your opinion changed? What is your caption now? And Marion Brown said that her annotate feature is at the top under view options. Thank you, Marianne. Okay, it looks like a couple people was in the view options section. Thank you so much. Okay, so in the chat box, type me up a new one. If yours is still the same, you can leave it the same. Okay, could be kids around each other playing or listening to music. Robin, can you go ahead and unmute and talk us through what evidence you used? And I just want to highlight, see what I'm doing here? I'm having students make a claim, and cite evidence using a photograph. So go ahead, Marianne. I'm sorry, Robin.
Yes, so I changed initially I thought playing baseball, but the child behind him, he's holding his shoulder. And so now I'm thinking they're too close together for them to be playing baseball. And so, but they're still smiling. So I would assume that they are either listening to music or they're just huddled around each other.
All right. Anybody else want to cite some different pieces of evidence that make you think a certain thing?
I said having fun because they're smiling.
Yes, lots of smiles in there. So I love this annotation feature because if you are teaching virtually, you can have students do this too. And so they can help stay engaged with you while you do that. Okay. You ready for a little bit more? Let's see here. Okay, here we go. Now what? Now what are we saying? Look at all those smiling faces. All right, so in the chat, type your new caption here. What is your caption for this photo? Oh, could be kids just posing for a picture with grandpa. Oh, okay. Marianne, why do you think grandpa? What evidence are you using? Kids listening to someone play an instrument, perhaps?
I would say I was with Marianne because the person in the center looks like he could be older.
Okay. So do you see the careful choices I made in which pieces I blocked off? And notice the inquiry that's happening. How many questions do you have right now or that are going through your head, right? Okay. So somebody says the top of the face that's hidden looks like perhaps an older person. It also looked like they might have been sitting in a chair. You're doing a really close examination of the photograph, right? In an ELA, they like to call that close reading. So I always tell my teachers, oh, you're engaging in close reading, but you can use a picture. Okay. All right, let's take a look at it again. Now what? Is your mind blown right now? What is your caption now? What is your caption now? I love the laughter. Little Rascals, yeah. Soapbox Derby, right? I wish I could read that sign on the front. First place. Marianne, what's your evidence to think that? Teamwork. I like that, Nicole. We hope they are the winners. Yeah, I'm cheering them on too, right? That's great. So think about what your very first caption was. And think about what you were thinking about that photograph. And as you gained more information, your opinion, you became more informed, and then it changed, right? So we want kids as a part of citizenship and civic literacy to understand that our opinions can and should change as we get more information, and that we shouldn't get dug into the dirt because we see one teeny tiny piece of information. This is really resonating with some of you, I hope, right now when you think about currently what the country is experiencing. And we want kids to be comfortable with changing their mind and that it's okay. All right. So when we think about LeGarrett's framework, Dr. King's framework from MU, one of the things that he really wants to encourage folks to do is to also consider Black joy. And we do not include Black joy often enough in our curriculum. And what a great way to have little kids who can go, hey, those kids are like me. They're like my size. And they have a group of friends just like I have a group of friends. And hopefully it builds more of a human connection with people that don't look like them and from time kind of gone by. Okay, this picture was from the Library of Congress. And when do you guys think it was taken?
I would say between the 40s and 50s.
Good guess. And if you were to ask kids to try to guess when it was, maybe you can ask them for different evidences. Obviously for kids, time as a very abstract concept is super duper complicated. My 8-year-old daughter told me the other day that in the olden times, like back when mom was born, I'm just ready for it, you guys. And so I said, oh, okay, 1978 is the olden times. So maybe some of you on this call are feeling really old right now because you were born before 1978. But she just was thinking it's any time before her, right? This is actually somewhere between 1913 and 1915. Okay, isn't that amazing? So this would be before you see the Model T running rampant. How cool is that? Okay, so when you thought about how the new evidence shaped your thinking, talk me through that for just a second. How did that new evidence shape or change your thinking? If somebody can unmute and just share their thoughts on that question.
I don't mind sharing.
Thank you.
So I think as I saw new different pieces of the photograph, it also changed my thinking, not just in terms of who all was involved, how many people were going to be in the photo, but then also the direction. Like this has a feel of movement in this photo that was not there when I first saw. I just thought the one kid was throwing the ball.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Leah. I love what Carrie said in the chat about how new evidence made me curious to find out more. And isn't that the point? Look at how this one primary source has now piqued your curiosity so much you want to go and learn more about it. That's the kind of curiosity and inquiry we want to birth in kids, because a part of being a member of a democratic society is to always ask questions. And we want kids to be curious. And so how can we hook them? So to find this picture, I literally I started out with a Google that was just African-American kids at play, 19th or 20th century, I think is what I did. And this is one of the ones that popped up, and it's from the Library of Congress, which means you can use it with no worries about any kinds of copyright infringement, which is great. In what unit could you include this photograph? We have a lot of people from a bunch of different grade levels. So where could you see yourself using something like this in your grade level? You can drop it in the chat or you can unmute yourself. Got some people doing both. And also, what questions do you have about this picture? Answer either one of those two questions. It'll speed us along a little bit if at least one person unmutes.
We're saying what unit we could use.
Yeah.
We do like an how things have changed unit in first grade, and so like talking about how like they're playing with this car or like they're playing with these things, like that could be different from what we do now.
Yeah, then and now. It's a great one. And she said second grade, right?
First grade.
First grade. Okay. Somebody else. What's your grade level? How could you use it? There's a lot of folks saying then and now in the chat.
Okay, this is really, I don't know how deep you need this to be, Tina, but I was thinking, okay, so I'm wearing a hat and then some of those kids are wearing hats, just the different kinds of hats. No kid's gonna wear a hat like that in 2021, but we all wear hats, even though it's 1915 and now it's 2021. So just like Nicole said, then and now, things that are the same, things that are different.
Yeah. What are some questions you have about the photograph that have not been answered? I think somebody said, did they win? Did they race? Somebody else, just unmute real quick and tell me your question. Don't be afraid. What does the sign say? I had that question too. Being impressed by the clothing. I'm very curious about the clothing. Oh yeah. So in a unit in ELA for kindergarten, it could be a favorite toy. I did search some favorite toys of kids to be a part of this too. Explain how transportation is influenced by industry, agriculture, and geographic features. That's good. Who built it? I want to know that too. Did those kids build that? Where did the parts of the car come from? Mm-hmm. Good. Okay. So let's take
I have another one, Miss Tina.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The other one would be, what part of the country are they? Because when I look at that sign, it makes me think of like, because it looks like Bed-Stuy, even though I know it's not. But this kind of reminds me of like, are they in New York? Because you do see like a little bench, well, not a bench, but like a stairway. So it's like, are you in New York? Are you in Philadelphia? Like, where is this located?
Yes. And I actually have that in the notes, and I'm not broadcasting in the notes. But if you go to Library of Congress, that link right there, and type in that item number, we can find that out real quick. Does somebody want to do that and drop that in the chat? I think it is New York City, if I remember the citation correctly. So I'll trust that somebody will do that. Anybody get a chance to copy? I don't know if you can copy and paste that link, can you? Well, here, we'll just do this. It'll just look ugly for a second. It is, oh, it just says Black children playing 1913 to 1915. So maybe I don't have the city after all. So that's good. You know what, that's part of the beauty of using primary sources too, is that we don't have to know all the answers, and we might not, but then that could send students on a fun little excursion too. Great question. Now you probably are going to go find it out, and then you'll have to tweet it out and let us know where you found it. All right, let's do another one. So the Library of Congress has analysis guides. So if you're one of those teachers who are like, man, I've never used primary sources before, I need like a guide to help me walk through this. Here's one that you can do. So that QR code is going to take you to the Library of Congress's website. So that bit.ly stands for Library of Congress _ observe, reflect, and question. And then when you get to that page, it'll ask you, what kind of primary source are you wanting to analyze? I clicked on photographs and prints. And so what you might want to do here is take a screenshot or like a photo with your phone of this little guide here, because in just a moment, I'm going to show you another photograph, and I'm going to ask you to observe, reflect, and question. In the observe step, we're going to have kids look at, or students in this case, you, identify and note details, just saying what it is that you see without making any kind of inferences or analysis. Just what do you notice first? The people, the objects, how are they arranged? What's the physical setting? Are there words in there? What other details do you see? Anything interesting? And then you want them to start generating hypothesis about, like, when do you think this was made? What do you think is happening? And then start to ask them, well, what do you wonder? Maybe they're gonna say, well, who made this? Or why was it made, or something, okay? You also, I've heard it presented before about teachers using see, think, wonder, same kind of thing. What do you see? What do you think? What do you wonder? Okay, so let's take a look at this picture. I love this. So what we did just a minute ago with blocking off some of the pictures, that's one strategy. This is another strategy where you could just show kids the whole kit and caboodle. And we're gonna go through that, observe, reflect, and question. So let's just observe for a moment. I want you to unmute, and I would like for you to tell me one quick detail that you see. And if we talk over each other a little bit, it's no big deal. Tell me one little thing that you see.
Laughter.
Go ahead. Kim?
Laughter.
Thank you.
Movement.
Good. Short dresses. Yes. What else? Just what do you see? Black joy. I do too. I do too. What else do you see? Nice shoes. What else do you see? Natural hair. Yeah, it appears to maybe be all girls, although I am very curious about this one person here that does not have a dress on. Yeah, maybe it's a uniform. Fun. There is a building in the back. So a lot of times when you give students the picture all at once, they kind of don't see the details anymore. And they just look at the dominant thing right front and center. So you might miss that there's a sidewalk. You might miss that there's a building. They look like they might be school friends. You're starting to make some inferences there. Are they at school? Is that a school building? Okay, take a look at that little guide you have. Look at the reflect prompts. Answer some of those questions here. You can see we're moving really quickly through something that will take kids a while to process. And even when I did this kind of thing with high school kids, they would so often miss the details that I had them divide a picture up into quadrants and say, just focus on one quadrant. And then all of a sudden they would say things like, okay, well, I see an open window. So maybe they don't have air conditioning, or maybe it's just nice outside. You know, and they started paying more attention to some of those details. What do you wonder? Or what do you question? What questions do you have about this photograph? You can unmute or log it in the chat. What are they playing? There's no leaves on the tree. So is it cold? Sweaters, but short dresses. That's interesting. What day of the week? What's the location, school or neighborhood? Are they at school? Maybe these are different uniforms. You think that it was taken to spark black joy. Interesting. Question is, are they wearing uniforms? Where was it taken? It really is remarkable image quality. When was it taken? It actually came straight from the negative. So you're not actually looking at the print there. I just know that because I looked that up too, because I thought the same thing. I thought, wow, that's really great. And when do you think it was taken? Who do you think took that photograph? You think that was a parent?
I would say, I know Gordon Parks was known for just different types of pictures. So I don't know. I don't think he did it, but it makes me think of him.
Okay. Maybe a teacher took the picture? Awesome. So this is just one other way that you can think about it. And what kind of unit could you use a photograph like this? You can drop it in the chat or you can unmute. Where could you use a picture like this? I anticipate somebody is probably thinking the then and now. Back to school expectations and rules of play. I love that. Human interaction with the environment. Okay, so here's where you can find this Library of Congress photograph. If somebody just pulled up Library of Congress, I'll give you the item number, 2017, 729, 541. So if you just Google LOC for Library of Congress and typed in that item number, 2017, 729, 541, you can find this item, and then you can download it for your own use. All right, I only have a couple minutes, so I'm going to move along here. The National Archives has some really incredible document analysis forms as well. This is what their document analysis form would look like. So maybe you can display it on a projector and show one of those photographs and walk kids through these different kinds of questions. You can also download it as an editable PDF so that you can upload it to virtual learners as well. So if you go to this bit.ly or scan this QR code, or if you just Google National Archives document analysis worksheets, and you can find different sheets for the different kinds of primary sources you're going to use: photograph, speech, audio, whatever. Okay, so those are the NARA documents, National Archives and Records Administration. Got some great news for you. I must share that Teaching Black History, the Center for Teaching Black History at the University of Missouri in Columbia, every year for the past 3 years has put on a Teaching Black History conference, and it is incredible. And this year, the theme is actually Teaching Tulsa's Black Wall Street and the History of Race Massacres. And so it's one of the richest, just amazing events that I've ever had the privilege to be a part of. And I get no kickback from this. It's just really that good. So if you get a chance to attend that conference, I will see you there. I wouldn't miss it for the world. And hopefully we'll be able to meet face-to-face again very soon. I want to know from you. So either using the annotation feature or the chat, or unmute yourself. Tell me in about 30 seconds, maybe your single 1, 2, or 3 biggest takeaways from the session tonight.
I really liked some of the tools that you walked us through for the how-to teaching, because I think that will help me to, make those things, make teaching Black history relevant for our teachers, like they feel like they can take it,
Awesome. Somebody said their takeaway is to caption this. Somebody says way to use photographs in other units. Great. Elevating images of Black joy, that opinions can change. Yes. Tools to teach Black history and how to make it relevant. Learning more history from your own state and how you can do better in your own knowledge. That's awesome. Well, it's my hope for you that you're purposeful about teaching Black history, because I promise you, curriculum makers at some point explicitly and purposefully excluded it. And so we need to purposefully and intentionally include it. Understand your role as an educator to advance justice, equity, and equality for all people. And a part of that is having an inclusive curriculum. Remain committed to all of your learners by having that inclusive curriculum, and just tell the truth. Tell the truth, because falsehoods and erasing history and erasing truth is always detrimental to our country as a republic, to liberty, to freedom. It will always, always get in the way. And I hope that you never stop learning. National Council for the Social Studies has this wonderful, wonderful journal called Social Studies and the Young Learner. And they have so many great classroom-based activities in there. And I highly recommend that if you're not a member of NCSS, you become one and grab this journal as your choice. Here, if you want to take a quick screenshot of those references that I had cited throughout the session on selecting those children's books and the Teaching Black Scientists, etc. I'll give you a chance to look at that. And I just wanted to say thank you. I think I'm over by 1 minute. Yes, elementary kids can do this too. I practice it in my house with my kids all the time before I try it out on big people. Closing your Black history knowledge gap. I love that. I'm committed to doing that for the rest of my life too, because I certainly come to the table with a deficit of Black knowledge, Black history knowledge. Thank you so much, everybody. If you're on Twitter, I would love to connect with you and continue to learn from you and with you. I will also drop my email in the chat if you want to send me an email or have any questions at any time. There we go. Thank you so much. And Todd, it's all yours.
All right. On behalf of Oklahoma Council for Social Studies, thank you all for attending tonight. I will put this attendance link in here. If you do want a PD certificate for this evening, you can fill that out. We are offering sessions each of the next 2 weeks as well. Those are online. I know I'm hosting next week a panel discussion on why representation in the classroom matters, and then the last week specifically on teaching Tulsa race riots. But there's other great sessions as well, so please check those out, and all of these will be available online hopefully by the 1st of February. We'll get those out. So thank everyone for being here, and have a wonderful evening. Thanks.
You did a great job.
Thank you very much, Ms. Terrace. I appreciate it. I'm glad you could come.